Welcome everyone to today's session, how China can help you meet your business needs and sales goals in Q2 and Q3. We'll explore and we'll share with you some of the not so hidden opportunities that we've identified when it comes to not only surviving in the short term, but getting positioned to thrive in the longer term. And I have to say, these are almost open secrets at this stage. A lot has changed since we did our very first webinar 6 weeks ago, and the idea of China as a key to surviving and thriving was still flying under everyone's radars at that point. So, a little about today's session. I'm Brad, and I research and create educational content around the tech, tools, and innovations in the world of Chinese advertising. I'll share with you today in today's presentation what happened in China and where they're at now compared with the rest of the world. Later, you'll be joined by Henrik, a serial entrepreneur and China marketing expert who has lived through COVID-19 from the start in Shanghai. Joining Henrik will be Jay, our CEO and co-founder. Jay has extensive experience across Europe and Asia, building and developing international teams and businesses. Henrik and Jay will take over for the Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, either now or during the presentation, feel free to pop those in the chat. The chat is set to private, but we can see everything that comes through. Just briefly, what we do at AdChina.io is help international organizations and brands get set up and start advertising and selling into China. All right, diving in. Today we're exploring 3 key ideas. The first is how China suffered in being taken offline for over 8 to 12 weeks, yet are now bouncing back after going through those struggles. Secondly, we'll touch on the opportunities that exist during this uncertain time across a range of industries and verticals to ultimately show that these opportunities could be helpful to get you not only through this crisis, but out the other side in a very strong position. Most companies, most entrepreneurs have thought about China, but not everyone has taken the steps. For some, their home market has been just too good to justify venturing outside of it. Others are unsure whether there's really that much potential in China, and some wonder whether the barriers to entry might be too high or too difficult, and we'll address each of those throughout the session today. First, let's dive into what's happened in China, what the impacts were, and where they're at right now from a broad perspective. Jumping straight into the data, China had their worst quarter economically since records started in 1976. As you can see, it was a bloodbath across many sectors. There were a few that profited during the downturn, which helped to minimize the overall contraction. And the key takeaway here is that even though these numbers are sterile and impersonal, it represents real people losing jobs, having hours cut, businesses closing, repayments and debts mounting with no way to pay, just as we've experienced outside of China. And no matter where in the world you are, it's real people severely impacted by this. And after all, no one likes being cooped up at home, reading sad news about what's going on for weeks on end. As a result of the lockdowns that were put in place to try and eliminate the spread of the virus, the economy slowed down considerably. As you can see here, there was a dramatic drop in January and February, with the signs of a beginning recovery at the end of March, which continued into a stronger April and May as well. So people stocked up on food and cut the rest essentially. But now retail sales and even auto, which was hit very hard, is trending quickly back towards where things were before the virus. I'll get into the particular industries more later. Next, I'd like to draw your attention to the bottom left graph. The trend before the outbreak was one of substantial growth. When Wuhan and later 80 other cities began to lock down, that turned negative, down 25% in the worst of it, where the holiday was extended. Then, as work gradually resumed over a period of 4 to 8 weeks, sales growth again turned positive by the end of that first quarter. Now, that in itself is crazy. Consider a business finding themselves suddenly thrust into negative 20 to negative 30% territory and then positive 8% just a few weeks later. That capacity for turnaround and that relentless clawing back to positive territory, I think, is something that's almost unique to China. While household consumption was down, cleaning products and personal care products helped to drive some of the spending during that period. On the positive side now, there's a lot of checks in place in China. Masks and a contact tracing app are required in many places, and temperature monitors have also been set up to identify infected people and get them both treatment and isolated to prevent further spread. In March and April, there was a government voucher program designed to stimulate the economy, and that drove consumption and served as an initial spur to get things going again. Estimations put the spending that those coupons stimulated somewhere between 2 to 8 times the value of those coupons. One major difference between China and the West is that although China has the reputation of being big spenders and dominating the luxury and high ticket markets, even just 40 to 50 years ago, it was still quite a poor country. As a result, their culture and thinking around money is a bit healthier, and they have a higher savings rate than almost any other country. Now, of course, no matter where a business is located, no one wants to be forced to close down for 2 months or longer. But having a little savings makes getting by a lot less devastating, both in the short term and in the longer term as well, as less government spending, stimulus, and other inflationary policies are required. That doesn't mean there aren't disruptions. No business can afford to simply stop operating for 2 months. The point is that comparatively, the Chinese economy is in a stronger position. And this strength is precisely why we perceive China holds the key to growth for many organizations' sales goals into the future. As this graph highlights, there are a lot of industries, verticals, and products expected to do very well in China over the next 6 months, and far less in the US. Again, this is just consumer sentiment. Shortly, we'll get into the real numbers of what's happening that backs this up. Let's start with that by looking at China's recovery trends that have come out of many different studies, surveys, and data analysis. The first is that there is a greater focus on health and relaxation. On the health side, that's very pronounced in terms of boosting immune systems, disinfecting, and taking preventative measures. Skincare, general cleansing are also big for similar reasons. It comes back to hygiene more than anything else. Secondly, they're spending more time with family at home. While that's starting to change and foot traffic has returned to pre coronavirus levels in most shopping centres, the trend of preparing food at home and connecting and enjoying time with family has remained strong. Another major trend is an increased awareness about fitness, and this likely ties in with the health and immune system side of things. They want to get stronger and healthier, boost their immune systems, and increasingly women are getting into fitness at much higher rates than before coronavirus as well. With a strong desire to travel in a population that either cannot leave China due to travel restrictions or simply not wanting to risk catching it abroad, there's a huge amount of travel happening within China. East are exploring the West, and South checking out the North to see and explore new landscapes and new cities. This is driving a mini boom in travel equipment, actually, which I think would have been very hard to predict ahead of time. But it's good that industry, which could have been crippled, is able to do well despite the virus. As mentioned earlier, car and auto products are rebounding. From the massive losses in the first quarter, owning a car has become very desirable in China, especially for families. And again, this ties in with the health and contamination elements that ride sharing or even walking can expose people to. On the right, you can see a graph from the IMF World Economic Outlook report for the month of April. China and India are the only countries anticipated to come in with positive GDP in 2020. And they're set to absolutely dominate in 2021, with double the projected growth of many other markets. Key point here is that China holds the potential for so many companies. In markets where everything is looking negative, the growth next year will probably be quite lacking. It might be wise to ask yourself what China may be able to do for you and your business. I'd like to share with you now a snippet from the KPMG analytics report published after looking at that 200 plus page IMF report. China has more room for fiscal policy compared with other major economies. China's national savings rate is relatively high, government debt as a proportion of GDP is relatively low, and it goes on to say that they're able to resist external shocks. In the second paragraph, it talks about China being a strong consumer market, with the last line, the huge market makes in China for China the core strategy of many multinational companies to invest in China. So, 6 weeks ago, in our very first webinar, we were presenting this as a hidden and a new opportunity. By the end of April, KPMG had published this. While it's no longer a secret that China holds the growth potential for many companies, it's still as true now as it was then. And the take home point here is that Chinese consumption will be one of the main drivers in the world economy for many years to come. It's not only great for short term survival, but potentially long term success as well. So things are trending much closer towards normal in China than in the rest of the world right now. People are returning to restaurants and physical stores. There's no longer the reluctance to go outside that hung around for a few weeks, even after the lockdowns were lifted in March. And yet, several trends that were established during the lockdowns have remained, and some new trends and opportunities have opened up as China itself has opened up. So, now I'd like to talk about some of the opportunities and give another level of context around why China is in a uniquely strong position compared to other world markets, not just relying on projections, but on what's really happening. China has been the world's largest consumer market since 2015. Since overtaking the US, it continued to grow fiercely and increase its lead. Part of this growth was simply because it's never been easier to sell into China, and that is true right now, even. While many countries have locked down passenger travel to and from many regions, there is no embargo on the flow of physical goods. China also invested in their economy with those vouchers I mentioned. Additionally, they're relaxing some of their regulations by creating new import and export zones and implementing new policies that are spurring growth. All this is happening in the context of a global climate where the situation seems to get worse each day. A lot of experts are anticipating that other world markets will continue to struggle with this virus and its economic impact in terms of these quarantines for 6 months, 12 months, or even longer. But right now, we have this enormous market who are accustomed to buying online. There were a lot of people who actually hadn't bought online before this virus, so there's a massive increase in new online users now as well. So, eMarketer, an organization that watches and reports on marketing trends, anticipates traditional ad spend will fall off, while digital ad spend will increase by 13% this year. And at that point, 3/4 of all ads in China will be digital. So let's dive into the industry side of things. This is not from the perspective of China, but from everywhere. This graph shows the worst affected industries and the reasons why. As you can see, tourism and hospitality has unfortunately been decimated because it ticks every risky characteristic box here. Sports and music, also quite risky, but innovative online solutions have helped to keep some involved in those spaces afloat. While auto sales have jumped since, they were initially hit very hard simply because buying a car is not something that can easily transition online. You want to know how it feels, how it drives, the little details of the features, how roomy it is, whether the family will find it comfortable. That combined with cars just being a big ticket item has damaged that industry. My father works at a dealership and they've had to let half of their staff go, and this is just in Australia, which avoided the worst of the virus with only a few thousand cases. That said, if China's any indication, the auto industry will likely rebound strong and quite fast as people look to more hygienic methods of transport. Alcohol, retail, pharma still impacted, but they've done much better comparatively, and that's also true in and outside of China. Looking at a few other industries now, we can see at the height of the virus, demand decreased in the beauty sector, as well as alcohol, luxury, clothing, in person fitness, travel, and physical recreation, whereas demand increased across medical care, insurance, nutrition and health, mobile apps, games and entertainment, household cleaning, food and drink, and preventative healthcare. Some of those trends continue, others are starting to return to normal, and we'll dive into those shortly. In terms of entrepreneurship and new businesses launched, the top categories were online medical consulting, online education, remote working tools, online entertainment, so games, video apps, and so on, live streaming, social e commerce, personal fitness, and online banking. Not sure what the draw card is for online banking, but the others you can see are quite squarely tied in with this current situation. China coming back gives a lot of opportunities, as you can see here. This is a snapshot of signups to our platform since this all kicked off in February, showing the diverse interest in China. As you can see, some industries have more representation than others, but there's a broad range of industries that are reaching out to us. What this shows is a rising awareness around the globe, a rising interest in China. If you're not already thinking about China, it might be time to, because your competitors probably are. The point I want to make here is while many are still caught in panic mode and are trying to make ends meet, we're not the only ones aware of China as an opportunity. The KPMG report shows this is known far and wide at this point. In many cases, services can be delivered entirely online. You can't fly, but your products can fly and they can get to their destination. Likewise, you don't need to meet in person to do business. For now, we'll take a look at a few more industries. And later today, you'll receive the PDF with examples from other organizations, some businesses and some not. While it can be useful to look at what competitors or other businesses are doing, it's also true, as Peter Drucker identified, that innovation often comes from looking at separate industries entirely and adapting those ideas to fit into your business, and this creates something interesting and unique. That said, if you're involved in an industry that we don't cover here, feel free to get in touch with us at the end of the webinar or leave a question in chat. For now, I'd like to dive into some of the most obvious sectors. We have retail sales shifting to China with logistics and shipping running very close to normally. I'll share some examples with you shortly, and you'll see some more later today in that PDF. I'd just like to talk through these graphs firstly. As you can see here on the right, most of China is back to work now. Each dark blue province is 95 to 100% reopened, and the lighter blue are 70 to 95% open. If you joined any of our previous webinars, you'll see the dark blue has expanded to cover all but 2 provinces now. Shipping and logistics are also resuming nicely, and there's been a massive upswing in online shopping and positive consumer sentiment that retail businesses should find especially exciting. A few examples of products that are going quite well right now include protein, activewear, fitness devices and trackers, health foods, and luxury goods. But that's only a very small snapshot. Because a lot of people are forced to adjust to online shopping, you have a huge population used to it and a new population that have now discovered it and are becoming familiar with it on top of that. And there's been a huge surge in first time shoppers. To cash in on this, influencers on social media are doing live streams to showcase certain products. And this has been a marketing strategy for a while in China. But there's also been this sort of post corona boom, which has really kicked off and cemented its place in modern advertising strategy. And I feel this in itself is quite telling. There aren't exactly emerging or innovative forms of advertising going on in the West right now, with sales dropping. I'm seeing a few questions come through in chat. Just a reminder, feel free to ask your questions anytime and we'll address those at the end. To continue with why China is such a great place for retail right now, the barriers to enter are still low. With cross-border e-commerce, you don't need a Chinese entity to do business. You also don't need to set up your logistics entirely on your own. And if your website loads in China, you can start selling right now on your current website, or you can get one set up. If you're interested in China but not sure whether your website loads, we'll show you where to contact us at the end and we can test that for you. It can be quite quick and easy to set up a point of sale in China, and we can point you in the right direction for how to do that as well. And with technology like AdChina.io, advertising in China is now easy. We've made it similar to advertising on Facebook or Google. As consumption shifts more and more online, with influencers spruiking products on streaming platforms, a DIY approach is more achievable. Plus, physical distribution in stores is becoming less relevant as the population becomes more accustomed to buying online. If you have stock not moving and sales plummeting in your home markets, China might offer a way out of that. I mean, ask yourself, what would it mean for your business if you could start selling in China within the next month? As I mentioned 2 slides previous, live streaming is absolutely booming, and e commerce average use time is also up. Corresponding to this, online selling platforms are booming, with JD completing more e commerce sales in the first quarter of 2020 than the entirety of 2019. That is just mind blowing. Software like mobile apps and games have been less impacted, and in some cases positively impacted, with a population that recently had a lot of free time. And I don't want to pretend like that it was a holiday for China. It was difficult and I imagine very scary, just like it is in the West. But at the same time, people want things to take their minds away from that as well. Now people are back at work with a renewed interest in entertainment and other types of mobile apps. And that's now coupled with an ability to pay. That's always good. I'd like to show a few stats just to back that up. So there was a 40% jump in app installs in the first 2 weeks of February compared with the 2019 average, and downloads for all Tencent apps grew by 32% month over month and 43% year over year. As you can see, quite a considerable jump in daily active users for the top 3 mobile games in China compared with last year. And my key takeaway here is that this trend is set to far outlive the coronavirus. We have new data that has come out in the last few weeks to indicate this is absolutely correct, with more average time being spent on mobile games per person compared with last year. Another obvious industry that will thrive not only in China but also in the West is education. This is a truly global opportunity. And you might recall it was one of the industries both the US and China populations anticipated to grow in 2020. There'll be lots of people learning new things online to retrain or learn new skills in the post coronavirus world. And this one's going to happen both in and out of China. We've also experienced firsthand a huge increase in education related companies coming to us. With travel restricted, online options such as online education and open universities still allow students to get a Western education if that's important to them. Tutoring and coursework services are also expanding, so no one wants to feel left behind, so they're popping up to fill in the gap. Chinese schools are opening up after going digital. This is and has shifted the view of parents to be more likely to use digital tools for learning. Even in the West, schools are now running via Zoom and other apps. Parents are changing their beliefs about whether these tools can really work. During that period of potential lost time and progress academically, many want to make up for that. But there's also an opportunity for other kinds of education, like language tuition, for example. Even professional courses that focus on marketable skills will do well now, as people are trying to position themselves to increase and expand their ability to create value. One example of China's increase is in WeChat mini programs in the education space. Essentially, these are little mini apps within the each WeChat app, and there's been a sharp increase in use across those 5 categories. I'd like to talk about 2 specific examples of companies adjusting into China during this time. The first is a supplement company that sells protein and creatine powder for people who want to get in shape. And they've recently increased their efforts in China after a period of stagnation during the lockdown. With gyms reopening across China and many people now more conscious about taking their health seriously, this company has found a solution that's let them keep selling despite underperforming home markets and traditional foreign markets, which is, of course, a result of gyms being closed. What makes this especially impressive is that they're selling a physical product for through a physical supply chain for a physical activity. That's a very difficult combination during a pandemic, yet creative thinking and adapting their business model allowed them to distribute and continue making sales during this window of opportunity. To stick with the outdoor theme, a company that sells activewear into Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Germany, they were happy in their home markets. They kicked around the idea of China loosely, but they were content in the European market, so they didn't take action. After experiencing a sharp decline in sales in their home markets, despite planning for a big season and stocking up on inventory, they made the adjustment and are launching into China. They're now diving into a new market, but at least it's one with a greater potential than their traditional markets. For some extra examples, both related to China or other actions you can take, keep an eye out for that PDF that live attendees will receive an hour or two after today's webinar ends. Of course, we haven't covered all industries, but we see opportunities for most industries in China. If you have a question about a specific industry or anything else, feel free to ask that in chat. I'd like to now share with you a few words of wisdom from David Ogilvy, known best as the father of advertising. Studies of the last 6 recessions have demonstrated that companies which do not cut back their advertising budgets achieve greater increases in profit than companies which do cut back. Super relevant to this situation, and it drives home the importance of keeping the pedal down through the hard times to set yourself up to come out on top in the good times. Of course, you need to be very smart with how you invest your money, but the logic is that advertising should not be cut back when times are hard any more than you'd cut back any other essential aspect of your product or service. Just to touch on a few points for why now is a good time for China, there is light at the end of the tunnel and there are opportunities to take advantage of. And more than that, there's logic and reason behind them. It's one thing to say what the opportunities are, it's another thing entirely to see that there's sense behind them. China's role has shifted to becoming a world driving market, and we perceive this crisis will position China even further ahead. So much so that it's likely that the companies which leverage China to stay afloat through the next 12 months, however long this lasts, they will be in a position where they can emerge successfully from the crisis, while their competitors are forced to either close, struggle, go into debt, and face hard times. With China doing better now, there's a chance to jump on and ride that wave. And consider that. What impact could this have on your business? I'd like to leave you with some of the upside and opportunities to why China could not only be a lifeline for your business, but something even more in future. While China is still facing challenges, China is really coming back, giving international companies who are facing challenges in struggling home markets an opportunity to potentially survive and thrive. The world will take time to get back on their feet, but investing in China now may get you into a nice position, because China will be a core market and source of growth well into the future. There will also be lots of adjustments made as we acclimatise to the new normal when the world comes out the other side of this pandemic. So now is a smart time to get set up. And to reiterate, while there's a lot to like about China's economy in the short term, Chinese consumption will be one of the main drivers in the world economy well into the future. With that, I wish you the very best as we go through these difficult but exciting times together. But now I'd like to introduce Henrik and Jay for the Q&A. If you haven't already, be sure to add your questions into the chat now. Henrik and Jay, over to you.
Let's see. Yeah, it seems like that was a lot of very interesting information for people. I've had to sprint to keep up in the chat. So I think we just dive straight in. Yeah, Jay, first question. So this is about this is from one of the viewers who's looking to target Chinese families with young children, and this is specifically then for the educational business. Could you tell a little bit more about how that is possible?
For the education, of course, I mean, first of all, thank everyone to join our webinar, and this is a very good question. Actually, as you can see from the presentation from Brad, education industry is booming, and it has been booming all the time in China, and now actually it's even more relevant than ever. I'm not sure which part of the education you are handling with. Either it's for which specific subject. Either it's language or mathematics or anything else. But in general, it's a big market. There are plenty of.
Sorry, Jay. Just to add in, since you asked, this is specifically English through music education.
Okay, that sounds very
question.
Yeah, very interesting. I think if you're targeting, I think it's very good that you are targeting at that part of the audience, and because it's very specific. With different digital medias in China, you can do it already. If you work with us, of course, we have this multi-channel platform where you have a lot of targeting options that you can select from. Not only the family with young children, but also where they are, what kind of interest they have, either they are musical or not, and also have they been traveling around the world. I mean, a lot of you can be very specific in your audience selection. So that's not a problem at all to target them. I mean, of course, if you want to sell the service, then you have to have also a payment in place. This is education, I guess, is online education as well.
I think I'm just going to interrupt you for a second there, Jay, because today we have so many questions, and you are actually you're almost leading into the next one. So I just wanted to frame it a little bit, because the other part of that question is that they've heard that they need a bank account in China to make payments possible. What is the standard business structure on this, and how can they expand into China? And I think that fits very well with what you were starting to talk about.
Yes, I was about to talk about that as well. You don't know. First of all, you don't need a bank account in China. That is actually long gone. In China, you have, I mean, people are very used to use AliPay, mobile payment solutions from AliPay and from WeChatPay. It is possible for you to open up that account on those platforms and start to collect your revenue from your customers in China already. And you don't really have
plug here. And sorry, just a little plug here. This is also something we help a lot of our customers with.
Yes, yeah. We don't provide that, but you know, the payment solutions are provided by AliPay and WeChatPay, so we can help you with opening up those accounts, and they are quite standard for Western. They call it merchants already.
And on the business structure.
On the business structure side, I don't think you need an entity in China either. You're a merchant. You sell a virtual product online. You don't need a legal entity in China for that. I think this is something we want to emphasize. You know, in the past, many entrepreneurs and companies, and big and small companies, have thought about Chinese market, but you know, it's a lot of things to get around, and also a lot of different information around. and then a lot of entrepreneurs just decided, okay, it's too much hassle to figure out that. And then now it's time, actually. Now it's time to figure it out. And also the barrier of start selling in Chinese market is lower than ever, actually, with e-commerce, with online digital media to reach the right target audience. So it's not that hard to start.
Yeah. And just a quick follow-up on this. So it's AliPay and WeChatPay is available for companies as well. Yes, in terms of whether you need a corporate WeChat account for that. Do you want to take that one, Jay?
No, just go ahead. I think.
I mean, do you know what's the setup?
No, I mean, you just need to be validated as a credible merchant by either AliPay or WeChatPay. On WeChat, since it's a quite big ecosystem, you probably want to consider to utilize their traffic as well by setting up official account, by setting up advertiser account, so that you can start launching your campaigns towards the target audience that you want to reach. And during this process, they will ask some documents from you just to validate that you are doing something that is legal in China. That's very common for every industry.
Yeah, and WeChat accounts can be activated from overseas. Yes. It's also one of the innovations that we've done with AdChina.io, if for those who haven't seen yet, is actually we've created a marketplace inside the platform. So it's free to sign up, register, and go in. And you can also check out in the marketplace, and there you can see, for example, what's the cost and what is the process to get set up with a WeChat official account and things like that. Like what's the steps, what's the cost, and it's how to say, it's not very cost prohibitive at all. So that's just to answer some of the extra questions coming in while we were talking about this.
Yes.
I think we go to the next one. So this one is a little bit, basically, we've had several questions that come in on B2B companies. And I think we'll start with the first one. So for B2B companies who are used to doing business development on the ground in China via events, conferences, etc., that is suddenly, it's a little bit hard due to not so much travel. What do we suggest for them, and what have we seen that works?
So first of all, I mean, we have seen a very high surge on the increase from the B2B companies. As you said, a lot of activities are impossible these days, and also impossible in the near future as well. We don't know how long it's going to last, but conservatively, it's going to be the rest of the year. I mean, if we are, let's say, more pessimistic on the situation, I think it's going to last for maybe 1 or 2 years from now. And that actually releases a lot of, from our point of view, it's of course, is a challenge for us trying to do the business as usual, but it's also an opportunity. Because first of all, Chinese market is very accessible online. I mean, I'm saying this in a kind of again taking it for granted that you work with us, but then Chinese internet environment is disconnected to the rest of the world. But on the other side, the digital economy and also the penetration of the size and the penetration of the digital economy in China is let's say the most in the world compared to any other country, actually. So it is possible, and also it is recommended to access Chinese market via, let's say, online channels. So from our point of view, and second, that will, in that case, that actually save a lot of money for the companies that are trying to penetrate Chinese market at this moment. So that's an opportunity that is, if you really think about it. So from now on, you don't really have to go down there, because nobody can go down there. You don't have to worry about your travel expenses and so on anymore. It's about actually being capable to reach the right target audience in China, and that's possible, and that is from our point of view a good thing to do, actually, compared to the old ways.
So just a little addition here, because there's a reason why we work with this, and it is that we are very enthusiastic and very passionate about this. So when talking about this, I feel I just have to add a little bit as well. And it's what Jay said about the release of a lot of funds. So we've had several cases where customers come to us and they say, okay, we have this amount of budget. We had planned to go to this and this event. What do we do? And then we take that and we help them plan digital campaigns to go live, and be able to reach their customers in China from the comfort of the office or home, their home. And the other part is there. Every time I get asked by clients, how do you do B2B in China? Like, can you do that with digital advertising? Because that's not in the West. That's maybe not the easiest thing. But in China, the thing is that everybody is on social media. Like, if you go to, if you've ever been to a conference in China and you see like the top CEOs and everyone, all the buyers, even like during the conferences, when there's speeches, they're all on the phone and they are on WeChat, because everyone is there. So how do they? And that means that they are reachable with paid advertising. In addition to that, Jay, maybe you can also mention, one of the newest channels that we've added with LinkedIn.
Yeah. So first of all, LinkedIn is separated from the West when it comes to their Chinese version, and then and also it's very different. It took us some time, actually. It's not that easy to get connected with that, but we managed, and it's a powerful tool as well for B2B clients. At the same time, it is cheaper, it is more targeted, it is much more data driven. So actually, I think doing it online is probably better than going to the conferences and exhibitions. And the good thing about Chinese B2B market is that, as Henrik mentioned, the previous exhibitions and conferences have become already, before the pandemic, so much digitalized already. I mean, with all the social media involvement and so on. Now they are just, for example, the largest export or actually import event in the world, this Chinese import Expo, the Chinese China International Import Expo this year is going to be online. Chinese buyers will buy products from the sellers from all over the world, because no one can go to Shanghai anymore, or very difficult, actually.
It's hard anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think then with that, it leads us into the next question, which is similar but with a twist, because we talk a lot about the need and the growing need, the big opportunity that there is in China, the big consumption, the growth, how that is coming back, and there's fantastic opportunities there. But and this is from a question we got now that is quite interesting. There is a different way of seeing this, which is that the Chinese companies who want to sell and work towards the West, towards Europe, towards the US, what are the opportunities there? What's the current appetite for Chinese companies expanding overseas? And also what are some ways for consulting and business services companies to get in touch with them?
Yes, that's a very good question. We don't do this, but we know this very well because we're dealing with the Chinese market for our customers. So first of all, you have to remember that I mean, China, of course, is bouncing back on the consumption, and on the investment and so on, but it is suffering from the dimming future of the world economy, because China is very much, or has been very much, export oriented. I mean, they're suffering from the pandemic economically as well, but on the kind of the other side. So the orders from all over the world are canceling, are delaying, and so on. We also have seen that from some of our partners. They're very eager, actually, to increase their presence outside China, so that they can actually keep up with the recovery of the world as well. Again, I think in this time of crisis, the visionary entrepreneurs are looking at the future. This is a very interesting expression. So finally, we have time to do the important things. So there are many companies looking into that at this moment. So I think if there is anyone dealing with their local market, for the Chinese companies to set themselves up, I think that's a good business to look into right now. It's not our business though, but it's I think it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
No, and also another thing to remember is that in this pandemic, I think this is so. First of all, this is not political. We are focusing on the business, but in general, China, what Chinese government and Chinese businesses are trying to do is trying to promote even stronger the globalization compared to the kind of some other countries in the world. So this is what they are trying to do. So they will come out. They will actually do even more to open up their economy, to invest abroad, to increase their relevance to the rest of the world instead of less.
Yeah. And now it's another curveball. Can you please talk a little bit about the new eRMB, the new money in China? So I know this is, again, it's a little outside of our core business, but I think I think it would still be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
I think China have been playing with this for a while. I mean, many other powerful players like Facebook, for example, have been looking at electronic currency for a while. China is very serious about this. First of all, I cannot. I'm not an expert in this, but I'm just interested in this topic, and we talk about it and investigate from time to time. So this is our take. So first of all, Chinese both government and also private sector is taking this very seriously. Second part, as I mentioned, China is trying to be international, more international, and this is how they can do it. Compared to the old traditional way as well. So it's part of the strategy. The third is that I think they will be very, they will take very strong initiatives to promote this currency, new currency, let's say among the world, in the other countries, in order to make it easier for the internationalization of Chinese economy. So I think all of us, if we are looking into going into Chinese market, is going to benefit from this, in a way, infrastructure very soon. I think it's going to be much easier in the coming, I would say, number of months. For us to be able to have a better, let's say, settlement solutions and so on. Right now, it's already pretty convenient with AliPay and WeChatPay. It's going to get even easier going forward.
On this one, I know we've talked about it a little bit, or we talked about it some, but I would still like to hear your thoughts more specifically. So what would you say are some targeting possibilities to target B2B in China, specifically in the skincare, health and beauty, focus on manufacturers and distributors?
On this one, so first of all, I mean, it's again, our targeting tools can be very specific. What I would suggest is to start somewhere with, for example, the interest in this industry, and also the career, or let's say, if we are working on LinkedIn, then we can actually target on the insiders of this industry, and also we can also look at the certain areas where the manufacturers are located, or the popular manufacturers are located, because in China this kind of a cluster effect is very common. That you have a lot of let's say factories or let's say businesses getting together with the same or similar related industry, getting together geographically. So those are the criteria I can think of. But again, we are in the business of digital marketing, and the reason why we build the platform is to make it easy for the Western advertisers to let's say launch small tests of campaigns and see which ones are actually producing the best. And it was not possible before our platform. Now it is possible to launch small campaigns and to learn from those results from those campaigns and adjust and iterate and try to find the best combination of of the message, of the channel, of the targeting criterias, and then push the pedal and look for the right combination. That's what we do. So one of our customers, I want to mention this. One of our customers, for example, not only one, actually, several of our customers are actually running testing campaigns for market surveys in China as well. So, I mean, that is also possible. If you're very hesitant about going into Chinese market, am I going to actually go into a market with no customers? Run a campaign. Run a small campaign. It's not going to cost you anything other than more than a trip to China, which is not possible now, actually. So it's going to be and learn from it, from our point of view.
And I just wanted to add there a little bit to how to say on the raw details there on numbers. You know, previously to do advertising campaigns in China, you kind of have to come in with 100,000 US just to be able to start. Now with China, we can do it, you know, depending on the industry and the channel, it's down to 1,000 US. You know, and you get true data, trustworthy data that is based on real customer interaction, real interactions with your target audience. And for most channels, it's most channels is also around like 5,000 US. Gets you started. So that's just to show like how much lower the barrier to entry is now. On the next one, so this one is this is also a very good question. What are the typical processes / analytics available to measure conversions and ROI for key marketing channels in China?
That's very different, actually. Can I ask which industry are we talking about, or it's just a general question?
Let me see. We can give it a couple of seconds and see if we get It's a general question.
If it's a general question, then I can talk a little bit on this. So first of all, I mean, if we're talking about a B2B, we're talking about generating leads, and someone has to follow up and validate and try to convert. That's the conversion is actually to generate the leads. At the same time, you want to probably, so for some of our customers have a very long conversion cycle or sales cycle, like up to 5 years, for example. What they need to do is to create a community where they can hold the professionals in the industry updated. That's one way of doing it in the B2B side. When it comes to consumer side, I think when we're talking about conversion, it's mostly consumer oriented. There are different industries. For digital products, for example, like software, application, games, download, and so on, it is now possible to actually, it's not very, for a very long time actually, but now it's possible to finally launch campaigns in China and pay for the acquisition, pay for the downloads. It is also possible with our platform as well, and that one is much easier to track compared to the others. For the retail industry, when you're trying to sell a physical product in China, then it is more difficult. It is more difficult because the largest e-commerce platform in China is Alibaba ecosystem. Basically, they have several
Tmall,
Tmall, Taobao, and so on. Even in Tmall, they have Tmall Global and Tmall, so it's a lot of separations. So the problem with Alibaba is that they are a platform very much closed to the rest of the ecosystem. They want you to spend all the money of all the budget of your marketing in their platform, buying traffic from them. So when you are doing a lot of campaigns on the social media, for example, which is very much dominated by Tencent with their QQ and WeChat. If you want to, let's say, run campaigns on, for example, the very strong platform of ByteDance, like Douyin and Toutiao, these kind of platforms, the data is not that I would say flowing that smoothly like in the West when you're launching campaigns on Google and Facebook. So there you have to make small tweaks and small, let's say, tactic moves so that you can track those conversions by giving out vouchers, by giving them a discount code, and so on and so forth. But first of all, it is possible. And second, it's not that difficult. It's more difficult than the West, but it is possible to achieve and to track in China.
And if we can steer your answer a little bit there, because we had a follow-up question here as well, which is very, very interesting. I actually, just before this webinar, I came from meeting with one of our clients where we're working exactly on this one. So if we then limit this, like how about conversion tracking in WeChat for enquiries from WeChat display ads, or measuring the revenue if you have a WeChat mini program store?
Yeah, that is possible then. Again, as I said, I mean, in China, it used to be like we call it tale of two cities, because you have Alibaba ecosystem and you have Tencent ecosystem, and yeah, they're head to head. They don't share data between them. You have to do all the tweaks. But then if you decide, for example, to reside in Tencent, which is more open, objectively speaking, you can actually have a very smooth data flow and tracking within the system, even not only with Tencent, but also the kind of the companies that Tencent supports, like JD.com, for example. JD has a very smooth integration with WeChat. And also in WeChat, you can also set up your point of sale if you want. with a mini program, for example, or a WeChat store. I mean, there are many other companies providing that service. We focus on the marketing, the traffic generation and the lead generation. But then there are many other companies in China and outside China helping clients to set up their point of sale in WeChat, for example. There are even listed companies doing this in China. Stock market listed companies doing this in China for companies, not only for the Western companies, but for in general, for companies setting up and operating their online stores in the WeChat and Tencent ecosystem, in competition with Alibaba, of course.
On the next one, how much do we need to protect in terms of trademarking and copyrights? Now, I think, of course, this is very broad. We are not a law firm, but yeah, if you're happy to add a little thoughts on that, anyway, Jay.
We love the customers that have a feeling about their brand. That's important, and we believe in that as well. I believe in that. I think for every brand and company that goes into Chinese market should have a brand strategy, should have a protection of their brand and also of their IPR as well. And then, of course, but there is a degree of doing this. Many of our customers, they start the sales of their product in China after they acquire the trademark in China, especially when they are registered somewhere else already. But then, in order to test out that market, you don't have to have everything ready, and also you can do many things in parallel. If you have a strategy for Chinese market, start the process already. I mean, you need a brand. You need the brand, and you want it to stand out. So start the registration process already. Register it in China. Again, you don't need a Chinese entity in China in order to hold a brand. You can still be a foreign company, Western company. And then at the same time, start the let's say the market access and also market research. Again, from my point of view, there is no better market survey compared to a test run of your product at the price point that you want it, or you initially want it to be, and test out the market and do some pre-sales and see how many of them are actually sold. Actually, in the end, of course, the delivery time, cost will be higher than the optimal, but at least you know where the willingness to pay is, right? That's my point. But do protect your brand and IPR. If you have a patent, try to register it in China as well. If you have a brand, do that as well. But it doesn't stop you from starting. Don't wait for it.
Yeah, and what I also want to add here is that, you know, if you are looking for partners on things like that, you know, there are so many in China. It can be hard to know who to go to. Feel free to reach out to us. We can, others say we don't tell you specifically who to go to, but we do have some that we can recommend. So at least you can start your search there. You know, so you don't need to start with a Google search, which might not be the best way to go about it. You know, and that's not something. It's not for us to make money on. It's just you know, we know that the more people who succeed in China, the more need there will be for Ad China IO. That's our angle on that one. The next one. Do you think the ICFC, so in China for China companies and products, can protect the market from outside countries and products?
Okay, repeat the question.
Yeah, so I think maybe I can paraphrase it a bit as well. So it's basically the products made in China for China, those companies and products. What's your thoughts on them protecting their market share from outside countries and products?
That's a very big question. It's a good question though, but it's a very big question.
Maybe we
can. What I like about Chinese market, I want to take it this way. I say what I like Chinese market is the diversity, is the spectrum. The good thing about Chinese market is that every niche is big enough, usually big enough for a Western company. So when you go into Chinese market and if you look at someone is doing similar things, making similar things in China, and then you wonder whether you can win the competition or not. So try to find what is unique about the product, or maybe it's not unique, but what you want to hold on to as the unique selling point, and then try to find the right audience. I think that's where the art comes in, actually. So I wouldn't worry about the protecting side, and then I mean in this world, I think it's very dynamic, and you instead of I mean no one in the protecting position and strategy would, from my point of view, survive in the new economy. You just have to go out there and grab the market and find the customer and grab market. Don't worry so much about the competition from the local players.
Yeah. So we have another question. It is a little bit overlapping with some of the things we've talked about, but I think it's still good to cover. So it's again how to generate business from China for a B2B company outside of China. But this one came with a little extra question, which is, or modulation, which is especially when we don't speak Chinese language.
Yeah, that's a challenge. So first of all, I'm not pretending that this is not a challenge. That is a challenge. Many of most of our customers actually don't have that capability from the beginning. But then so first of all, you have to. It's very much different from industry to industry. If you're in a consulting business, for example, you need to have someone. You need to eventually have someone that can deal with Chinese customers on a daily basis in their native language. But when you are, for example, a company that is selling a product, a physical or a software product, that is much easier. I mean, to manage without actually. So some of our customers would like to test out the market before they make the decision to hire one, for example, to hire one in-house to deal with the Chinese market. And I think that's a very smart move. Digital marketing is very flexible, and it's you can decide on just any time. And then, but a manpower to hire a Chinese-speaking staff in your organization is a pretty fixed cost. You want to make that decision based on some, perspective in the market, and instead of hiring one and ask him or her to find out if there is an opportunity in China or not. Yeah. That's my suggestion. In general, Chinese consumers and also in the business sectors, they can speak English, especially when they're trying to buy something from abroad. But then the first entry of the information is always good to be in their local language. So some of our customers would like to, they don't want to translate their whole thing into Chinese, but they want a landing page, for example, in Chinese language. They want the general information to be in Chinese language. They want the first one who is talking to the customer who can speak some Chinese language, just to guide the customer in in the customer journey. And I think that's a very smart strategy.
Yeah, and I think just want to add on this one as well. Like this specific question is related to how to say to a law firm helping how to say Chinese companies into India specifically. And I think there that when the Chinese companies are looking to go abroad, they generally have some English speaking capabilities. So that part is not as worrisome. I think the other part there that I just wanted to touch on is, of course, you know, when it comes to getting the leads, driving the leads, you know, it's important there that the advertising is in Chinese, that you know, the landing page is in Chinese, and that is something that we help with. So customers of AdChina.io, we help, how to say, included in the subscription is a certain amount of translation, so that we make sure that the ads that you are running are in Chinese. They, how to say, they have good language for the conversion, also for the landing page, like Jay mentioned, you know, like we'll set up the landing page, which can then be, which would be, and it needs to be, fully in Chinese, where we introduce your services, things like that, and then we can capture the contact information there, or even drive them, you know, to a separate page that could then be in English. So in terms of not having the Chinese language capabilities, that is one of the parts that we help with when it comes to the marketing and advertising.
Yes. Good point.
Let's see. So one question here is, can we focus on English-speaking companies? So there is unfortunately not a way to target people who speak English, but for example, it is possible to target people based on education. So you can say you only want to target people who have a bachelor, master, a postdoc, doctor degree. That's just off the top of my head, is one way of further narrowing that down. In terms, and one last question here, I think this might be the last question before we round off. The mainline Chinese is a great market. What about Hong Kong and Taiwanese markets? What type of access can we get to that? And I choose to interpret this as related to AdChina.io. Jay.
Yeah. So first of all, you can go there without AdChina.io, first of all, because there are Google, there are Facebook and Instagram and everything. At the same time, but keep in mind that there is a very important part of our customers, or let's say sectors, is that some of our customers, many of our customers, would like to target the Chinese-speaking and the Chinese-speaking community in outside China, actually, and the users that are using Chinese platforms, including the channels that we have been talking about, like Tencent, like ByteDance, like you know, Baidu, and so on, outside China. So from our experience is that there are, let's say, a lot of those platform users outside China as well, in Hong Kong and in Taiwan, definitely. And also in Hong Kong and Taiwan, the symbols are a little bit different when it comes to the writing of Chinese language. It's the traditional symbols. But then it is important when you're launching campaigns that you're using the traditional symbols as well. That's something to take in mind. Yeah, but yeah, if you want to, again, as I said, if you want to target the users of those Chinese internet platforms, then again, we are the best choice. But as I said, I mean, many of them are using Google as well. They have no problem with the access to Facebook or Instagram, so you can reach them as well with you know, other platforms. Then in that there you have more tools to play with, I would say.
And just one thing, because this is not something that we talk about that often, because of course our focus is on China, but with AdChina.io, specifically with the Tencent channels and with WeChat, you're actually also able to target Chinese who are abroad, whether they are there on travel, whether it's the Chinese community who lives in the country, and there is actually quite a large reach. So, just because it's our webinar, I felt I should mention that as well.
Yes, that's important. Yeah, we're talking about 40 million. I mean, it's not it's not a small number either. So
that it is. Let's see. I'm just making sure we didn't miss anything in the chat. Brad, do you want to just come and hop back on? And I think if you want to wrap up while I wrap up the chat. From me, thank you very much, everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks, Henrik. And thanks, Jay, for that Q&A session. That was awesome. Thanks for the lively and engaged discussions in chat today. That was awesome. And we will see you next time.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. And just because we got another question on it, we will send out our recording. Yes. Bye-bye.